This is our first time with you here in our new building, which you can kind of see, but you can't see the whole thing. As Carol said, we're really happy to have the technology set up so that we can be here for this gathering. It feels appropriate since there are so many of you that you have plenty of room here. And I want to welcome Vyana. Happy that she's here with us. Vyana has been studying Tantra with me for many years and now is heading up her own lovely ashram in the mountains of north of New York City. It's the Catskills, no? Is that technically correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
She actually is near a spiritual community that she lived in for 20 years? I don't know how many years.
13.
I mean, 13 years, yeah. A long time.
I taught there for 20, but I lived there for 13.
Yeah, you lived there for 13 and taught there. And so that qualifies her to talk some about community, having lived in that very tight-knit and complex community called Shalom Mountain in the Catskills. She also, in her training as a Tantra teacher, she focused on community and Tantra and wrote a paper about that. So this is kind of her topic. And so we're here to just see what emerges as she and I discuss, which we like to do, the state of affairs, in this case, particularly our current involvement with the COVID pandemic and how is that impacting community and how is community impacting it, and what can we make of this interface between the two phenomena, the phenomena of community, which has, as we will see and as we know, taken quite a blow from the pandemic. Communities have been drastically altered or eliminated or suspended or whatever they're doing. So Vyana, why don't you start and say a little bit about your thoughts and your perspective and your experience?
Sure. So one of the things I'm noticing around community in the last few months, and I'm very curious to hear what others feel, but there is that suspending of coming together, but there's also a coming together, well, like this, for instance, right? This particular group. So in some ways, I think it has forced us into a different kind of communing with each other, especially those of us who have been resistant of around virtual community. And I've been noticing that there have been, like this one, some larger collective conversations, and that just feels kind of interesting and curious. And the fact that we are doing community in this light grid called the internet is curious to me. So here we are doing it right now in a different way. And I also have been aware of that embodied community piece as being on pause, or kind of the craving to be in contact with other people. So anyway, so that's one of the things I've been noticing is this kind of drastic change in so many ways in how we come together and if we come together. And I'm just looking at so many faces that, you know, at least half of which I know on the screen. And it's so wonderful to see those faces, right? But I can't touch you and I can't, you know, have the weekend with you. And so there's also a kind of hunger that seems to come up, or a craving or a desire for that human contact. And that deeper, what I would call a deeper sense of community. One of the things I thought about when I was doing my Tantra paper on community was I was really thinking about how the chakras, the chakra system, kind of opens us into thinking about what it means to be together, right? And so those, especially the first, second, and third chakras, well, particularly the first chakra, like we're really, first and second, we're really not in this moment in community in the first and second chakra. On the other hand, I'm peering into where you are sitting, where you are at this moment. And so it's kind of a different way of being together. So that's kind of an opening thought that I have about that. It's certainly, I have a lot of other thoughts about it as well, but maybe that's kind of a good place to begin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you say that, it reminds me that for many years, many decades, over what's by now a fairly long career of working with different groups and making connections with so many people that I really adored and wanted to maintain a relationship with. But, you know, then I was in a different place, and then I was in a different place, and then I sort of despaired. And I remember thinking, there's got to be a way to do this where I can still be in touch with people, even though I can't transport my body around all the time, and they can't transport their bodies around all the time. And it's, there's just got to be a way that this can be done. And as I sit here looking at the screen and looking at a lot of people who I do have great affection for, and we're a lot far away, that we're doing that. We're actually have found a way to do that through this technology. I'm also aware that there are those who say that technology is a warm-up, kind of a dry run, kind of like, okay, we can do this without the technology, but we do it first with the technology to realize that it's possible. Mm. And then in some form, we discover within ourselves the capacity to do it without the technology. And for those of you who are students of the integral consciousness and the movement toward integral consciousness, that might ring a bell, that in the integral consciousness, yes, we can be in touch with everyone. And, and all the time, everywhere. and that's kind of course, hard for us in our current consciousness to grasp. Mm-hmm. But maybe it's a hint. Maybe this is a hint. Maybe this is a teaser. Like, okay, see, you can do it. You can have them all here. Now, you don't really need all this trappings of computers and wires and stuff. You can do that. And go, oh, really?
Just do it through the energy realm. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and do it through, I mean, you know, this reminds me of my years at Duke when I was in high school, in a small high school in the countryside of South Carolina. And I mean, there were very few students. This was in the 50s, 40s, 50s. And I became interested in extrasensory perception and telepathy. And I don't know how I heard about that in my very small world there. But I did, and I started ordering books from all over the world about that, and started reading about it. And then I actually, I can remember, this sounds like a non sequitur, but I can remember when we got a telephone. We were late getting those sort of things where I lived, but it was a big event to get a telephone. But then I read about all these things. I wrote a paper about it, and then I got a scholarship to Duke University, and I went there. And you know, the most bizarre thing was I ended up meeting and sitting at the feet for discussions with the major researcher in the world on extrasensory perception, who was at Duke University. And Dr. Ryan, J.B. Ryan, some of you who are older might remember hearing that. And so then, of course, decades later, I'm at the Himalayan Institute and learning, and in India and various places, learning about the things the yogis did. And I had a gentleman come to my office there at the Himalayan Institute, and he was from Korea. And I said, well, what brings you here? He was this scientist, you know, and he was came to live there for a while. And he said, well, we've done research in our laboratory to show how one dematerialize an object. I would have laughed at him, except that I had been to China and seen the lab where that kind of work was done, not in Korea, but in China. And I knew that that was true, that those projects had been done, and the Taoist masters had demonstrated it, like Swami Ravi came to the US and demonstrated all these things that people not possible. So I didn't really doubt him about that, but I said, well, yeah, so that's amazing research. And he said, yeah, but I know we don't need the equipment. I know we can do it ourselves without the equipment. And I came here to learn how to do that. And I said, well, okay. And I said, well, you know, obviously meditation is the place to start. He said, okay. So he stayed and studied meditation. And he went back to Korea. I don't know whether he's now, you know, dematerializing and materializing objects without the equipment they used. When I saw the labs in China, it was very sophisticated equipment. And they could actually show you that when the object had been, before it was dematerialized and relocated, the crystalline structure was of a certain nature. And then afterwards, it wasn't quite the same. It had shifted around and breaking it down and putting it back together. It didn't come back quite the same way. But it was clearly, the object disappeared here and reappeared there. So the equipment, I thought, well, okay, wow, this is a miracle. You can do it with equipment. But he said, oh, no. That's very crude. I know we can do it without the equipment. So yeah, here we are playing with this whole thing of we need to be together, and we do it with airplanes, and we do it with all this, and isn't that magical, a miracle? But no, we don't need all that. We can do it without that. And that's the integral consciousness. And I see Linda looking at me because she teaches courses about coaching from an integral point of view and talks about that a lot. Linda, raise your hand. She's our host tonight, as a matter of fact. Yes? Linda? Oh, is she raising her hand? My internet connection.
Yeah, she raised her hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. So yes, so that's another thing about community, that, well, maybe community is about to go through some kind of major transformation. And it won't be about so much about whose bodies are where. How about that?
And that, I mean, that brings me to an exploration or thought I've been having with Corona and the crown chakra. And, you know, maybe if we are all one and we are in the crown and we are in the awareness of all being one, You know, we are all connected already. We're already in community, in whether we're acknowledging it or participating in it or not. And so what one person does on one side of the world affects the entire planet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we know that it does. We know that it does, but, well, we know that it does, but not everybody accepts that. Well, that's really weird. What kind of thinking is that? But that's integral thinking. And yes, that's true. So we're just warming up here, I think, for the integral. And somehow this event of the pandemic, which is, felt all over the planet, it also has a kind of unifying effect because we're all involved in this.
Right.
And we're all a community of people dealing with the same thing around the whole planet. And that's new as well. I mean, I don't know that that's ever happened to this extent, and not with the level of communication about it and consciousness of it. So, big changes are happening.
They are. I mean, I think one of the things that I have found really useful or fun in some of my conversations and connections with you, Rudy G, has been the concept that the Great Mother is kind of the Great Mother, the goddess, the earth herself, is saying, all right, everybody go to your room. Enough. And think about what you've done. And, that was kind of a fun, right. Right. And that was kind of a fun thought, 6 weeks ago when you first brought it to me. But I feel like in the last 3 weeks, I'm sort of seeing the result of us having thought about what we've done. In the sense of the response to the George Floyd death, killing, and the response, the community response. I mean, it's got the movement of it. Like there's a kind of, we've been thinking about what we've done, and there's a kind of, at least in me, and I'll just speak for myself, there's a kind of renewed sense of commitment to be different. Right? To actually tackle some of the most violent parts of what we are as a society, and to not turn away, and not, sort of own my part in it. You said something to me. Yeah, you said something to me that really has been helpful, which is to practice in the integral consciousness is to take up 100% of the blame for a moment, to really own it. Because if we're all one, then we're all to blame. Like I'm 100% to blame, right? So if I'm 100% to blame, to just put that on for a moment, and then from that to be able to respond to what I'm looking at, and in this case, it's violence of police action on Black Americans, right? So that would be something I'm looking at. And it feels like as a culture, we're looking at it, we're searching for, in a different way, a different quality of owning my blame, owning my part of participating in that.
Right.
And so that gives me a clue as to what it means to be in integral consciousness as a community.
Yeah, as a community. So we think about, ourselves as individuals, which is a term I always object to, because it's really, we think of ourselves as individuals. We're divided from each other. And the community that we once were is divided rather than united. But anyway, we think of ourselves as individuals doing our meditation, our spiritual work. And we also say, well, as within, as without, so without, and that we are the microcosm. And so we are a reflection of what's going on in the macrocosm. So in all the heavens and all there, then the great sages tell us this, it's all represented here inside of us. But there is, I think, something between those two levels that you might call the mesocosm. And maybe that's community.
Mm.
You know, that's us as a collective rather than us as separate beings.
Mm.
And so community becomes something that is an essential part of that overall structure or plan of the universe, whatever. And in fact, in the yoga teachings and Tantra teachings, it's said that the gathering of other souls who are seeking the truth, which we call satsang, that is an indispensable aspect of your spiritual path. Mm. You cannot make progress without that. I mean, here we are, all on the screen. We're a gathering of souls seeking truth. And so we have satsang. And so we gravitate toward that. We need that. And so we are, for this moment, community that is in a very powerful and important way. So I think that we tend, in America, you know, people talk in other parts of the world about Americans, oh, you're all rugged individualists. We had a guy come here to help us think about restructuring our community. I live in a community. And he said, well, I don't know how well you're going to do with this because you're all rugged individuals, and how are you going to cooperate and collaborate to really shape this community into what you want it to be? And it's challenging, but so far we've done it for 26 years, something like that. So yeah, community, I think, is comparable to, okay, we have cells, and then we have
a body,
the human body.
Right.
But between those two, we have organs. And an organ is like a community of cells, right? Mm. So a cell doesn't do very well outside of the organ. They sort of die. Mm. And I think humans don't do well outside of community. They really suffer and sort of fall apart. Mm. And so for the overall body, the planet or whatever, to function well, the organs have to function well, which means the cells have to agree to live together in an organ and work and collaborate, right? And then everything runs smoothly.
So I listened to a podcast this week that I'd recommend to those that are curious, called it's out of WNYC. It's the podcast is United States of Anxiety. It's a terrible name, but this particular, and it's usually about Black American history and sort of reclaiming the historic or the current voice. Anyway, this week's podcast was called "Community is a Verb and It's Hard." And I thought that was a really, you know, sort of like love is a verb, right? Like that it's an action. Community is not it's definitely not a static thing, for sure. But it's hard. It's hard work, and it's extremely challenging. And yet we don't do well outside of community, right? Like, you know, it's sort of like what people say about marriage. You can't live with them. You can't live without them, you know. There's kind of it's really hard work, and it's what we need to be human, to be in relationship, I think, with other beings in some way.
Well, yes, I think you're right. But with all due, in all due humility, I think we should acknowledge that among all the peoples of the world, the peoples of this country are probably the least knowledgeable about community. I mean, there are groups in this country who have stronger communities, and often they're minority groups because they band together and they preserve the community they brought from their country or whatever. Mm-hmm. But as a whole, Americans are basically illiterate when it comes to community. We don't know how to get along with each other. You move into a suburban neighborhood, you don't know who lives next door, you don't know who lives, and you know, you can live there 10 years and never have spoken to them. We're not very, our forebears probably knew about community, whether they came from Italy or Ireland or wherever they came from. But when we got here, we sort of began to forget those origins, which is okay, but we didn't have anything else. So we really have become increasingly isolated. So I lived in New York City for 12 years, a lot of years, many years. Anyway, I lived there, and it was striking to me how many people live alone in little apartments in this huge, concentration of people. But community is very difficult there for whatever reasons. And it's hard to be without it. And it's hard for us to be with it, though I don't think that is necessarily an aspect of human nature. I think that many cultures have developed a community that they feel comfortable in, and it's easy, but or relatively easy, easier than it is for us. And they manage it and revel in it. And I mean, I think of Mexico particularly, in South Mexico, southern part of Mexico, where I spent some time in Oaxaca. The villages there are just an amazing example of how communities can work smoothly. And what you see there is people don't think of, when they don't think of I, they think of we. And that's just how they think. And that's how they organize things. It's like, we need to do this. And it's not just like, that ought to be done, so you do it. So we need to do this, but I gotta go. It's like, we need to do this, and we will all do it together. And so they do, and they've been doing it that way for 2,000 years or whatever. But we don't have that legacy to lean on. We have erased community. And, okay, so maybe those communities that we came with from other countries or that we grew up with, they had their defects for sure. So we're starting fresh. But we just have to say, we're starting fresh, but let's get on with it. Now's the time.
Well, and I think I want to loop back to what you were saying earlier about being able to be in community without necessarily being physically with each other. And maybe that's part of the fresh start. Maybe that's part of the redo that we are in as we build or we explore what it means to be an integral consciousness in community. Because it's partly not about necessarily all living together on a land and figuring out how to share crops and animals and all of these things. I mean, that may be part of it. I think it has to be part of it. But I think there's also a being in community, being in connection with each other, like we are right now in some way, right? Like with a common belief systems, common explorations, questions, exchanging of ideas that is perhaps not, in a sense, not needing that immediate embodied connection in order to do it. And maybe not even needing a Zoom call to do it either, like maybe, and there's a sense for me, as I've been watching, particularly the second, like the last week or so of the protests, and there's been a kind of sense of, the first 2 weeks I felt like, oh, do I want to be in on that? Or I'm in the middle of nowhere. How do I do that? What do I want to be in the presence of other people physically, right? The last week I have felt with what is happening without having left my little house. So how does that happen? How is it that I feel part of this movement, but I'm not actually there? Is that even real? I don't know. I don't know if it's real, but it feels real to me. So
yeah. Well, why can't it be? Why can't it be real? I mean, we 2 hours ago in this building, we were here, but we just completed a 4-day workshop that was all on Zoom, and there were 11 of us, three of us in this room, but the other 8 were from, but everybody was on the screen, like you see now. And it was an incredibly intense and very transformative and powerful experience. And people were sharing their deepest struggles with each other. And it was really beautiful and very productive. And that, a couple of years ago, I would have not thought that that could be possible. Mm-hmm. And so we're exploring what are the possibilities of community. Mm-hmm. And it is going to get it is being reinvented. It is now at this point being reinvented. And we're maybe barely begun to discover the possibilities. And as I said, maybe technology is a temporary crutch, and who knows what will follow. Mm-hmm. Do you want to ask?
Yeah, I want to see if you have any questions, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you have a question, you can just raise your hand and say your name and start talking.
Linda?
Hello, this is Jodi.
Jodi, hi.
Hi. So I just moved about a month ago. I moved to a new place with a woman who called me and said, I want to create a sustainable community. Like, will you come help me? So we're kind of like at the very initial moments of this. Like, we started a garden together and we're doing work, her and I together. But I'm just curious if you could speak a little bit about your experiences, both of you. I know that you've both had pretty amazing backgrounds in this, in terms of like structures, like governance structures and or things like to keep in mind when one is creating this kind of community that might avoid some of the problems that happen later on in that creation.
Oh, yes. I'll start, but I know Vyana will have a lot to offer too. I would say the first thing you do is you get some if you haven't already, is get instruction in nonviolent communication, because that technology is really important. You really need to be able to communicate in a way that doesn't create tension and dissension between the two of you, and with whoever else gets involved as time goes by. Then there are, it is quite a process to evolve an infrastructure, and I'm not talking about a physical infrastructure, but an infrastructure of agreements and ways to function. And all those have to be chosen. You know, you have to choose how you want to structure your interactions in your social organization. And you know, you often can't know until you try something. So it's an ongoing process. We've certainly seen that here at Earth Haven Eco Village, where we are, that this is a 25-year-old project. And the process has gone on, but the first 10 years, a lot of the groundwork was laid. It takes time. I mean, you can't be in a hurry if you're going to create a community. And so you have to hash out things with your fellow communitarians, you know, like what do they want, and what do we each want? How do we want to live? How do we want to work together? How do we want to interface? And there are so many little details. You can learn from people who have done it, but you may not want to do the same thing they did. But you can still, it helps to find out how did you do it? How did you do it? And and Vyana can talk with you some about community at Shalom, but I can also tell you that we have a member of Earth Haven. Her name is Diana Christian, and she's written a number of books on finding community, establishing community, how you do it. So look for her books, Diana Christian, on community. They're very simple and straightforward and very helpful. So it's a great adventure. It's a great adventure. So is it going to be clearly and primarily a satsang, a group searching for truth together? Well, then that's a special kind of community. Not all communities are doing that, and that's okay. But these are the decisions you have to make. Vyana?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I would say some similar things, and maybe I'll try to speak to, because every single person on this call is searching for community or creating community in your own way. And so I would recommend, there's a book by Christina Baldwin called Calling the Circle. That's a pretty good one. It's a little dated maybe now, but it really is for calling any kind of group, whether it's a women's circle, you know, or a Zoom call or whatever, you know, but I think overall, the main thing is to get that it's really hard work, and it may not last forever. Some communities come together and then they fall apart, and that's okay, right? It's okay to not have it last forever. We get kind of into this idea that it has to be a static thing, that we're going to create something and then it's going to be there for perpetuity. And so I think also the model I would talk about in tantric terms would be the intermarriage, right? That you want enough spaciousness in whatever structure you create to be able to allow people to arrive and leave, to ideas to arrive and leave, for projects to arrive and leave, right? But have enough of the masculine that says, you know, there's direction, there's leadership, there's a way that we make decisions. So, but it's really a constant balance between that open circular spaciousness and that linear directionality. Same as it is within ourselves, right? Same as it is within an outer marriage or a dyadic relationship. It's always true in community. And in some ways, particularly residential community is a marriage. You know, you are deep in it with people in a way that it's different from a retreat weekend, you know, or a month sabbatical, right? So to just understand that means that your root chakra is permanently signing up with other people, and that can stir up a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yes, very true. Does that help, Jodi?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Thank you.
So I saw a hand from Linda.
Yeah, yeah. So I've learned from Rudy G, when you were talking about, you know, how we don't really know how to be an organ. You know, we're all cells. I've learned two things that I'd like to share. One from a business partner in China. And when I lived there, I was so excited one time when I was ready to go back to America, and because I had found out how to take public transportation all the way to the airport. And so I told him, I said, Shan, I've learned how to get to the airport all by myself, you know, on public transportation. He said, you can't do it. I said, yeah, I can. And I showed him the route, and he said, you can't do it. And I thought, what's happening here? He said, you can't go because you have your backpack on and you're taking up room for two people.
Mm.
Oh.
And it had never occurred to me. And so what he taught me was, because he said, what if everyone did it? Mm. So the thing I really learned from him is to ask myself, what if everyone is doing X, whatever I'm thinking of doing? And then, of course, as an American, I said, well, I could buy 2 tickets. And he just looked at me like, oh my gosh, you know, throwing at it. Wasn't working either. So, and then the other thing was from a partner that I was living with who was in Zambia. And I was trying to understand how his family made decisions. And he said, well, the first thing is we think about how it affects everyone.
Mm.
And I said, well, like if you build a fence, you would think of how it affects my neighbors, is what he said, how it affects my neighbors. And I said, well, like if you build a fence, I could get that. He said, no, everything. Everything. And so those are two people that have taught me a lot. I'm still integrating those things. And the third thing I want to say is I wonder what we could do. What kind of experiment could we have? You know, what if we all met at Sunday at 7, 654? I don't know, and just kind of sat together, or I don't know, maybe it'll come to us in 6 more months, but I thought it'd be fun to think of an experiment.
Community experiment. Experiment in community living. It's always an experiment, community living. It really is.
But, not so much because we all are not going to live together, but some other way of experiencing this community, I guess.
So this is Arabella, and
yes.
Just a little story for Julie and for the rest of you. In 1975, 100 adults and 30 children and several dogs, although we had all agreed not to bring our dogs, several dogs showed up on 700 acres in upstate New York, the beginnings of the Abode of the Message community. We all knew our teacher, but many of us didn't know each other. In fact, I'd say few of us knew everyone. And what we had in our backpacks to support us were our ideals. They were rapidly shattered on the rock of living together. And we were in meetings every single night for a year and a half, trying to hammer down on those agreements. So I would say reach for every resource you can get. There are resources, groups of intentional community people, and I would say reach for it. The other thing I want to say is in regard to Linda's experiment. Many, many years ago, I had a lover who lived 3,000 miles away. And every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, no matter where we were, we would stop and meditate on each other and exchange breath with each other from 3,000 miles distance. And our agreement was that if one of us forgot or got sidetracked, it didn't matter, the other one would be holding space for it. And that was really powerful. So, Linda, there's an idea.
I don't see any other hands.
There's one hand.
Oh, there's one. Lakshman Hans.
Good.
Please speak.
Hi, this is Greg. Hey, I'm wondering in particular how, like at the eco village, which I've never been to and would love to come to, how you're re-envisioning community there and gatherings and Tantra offerings, like during this time and beyond. Like I'm wondering what visioning, how you're visioning into that, Ravi.
Yeah, well, first of all, welcome, Greg. Haven't seen you in a long time. So you're asking how we're envisioning you as the community using Tantra here at Earth Haven. Yeah. Well, this is a rather complex answer because Earth Haven is made up of 14 different neighborhoods. And each neighborhood has its own sort of raison d'etre, its own way of doing things, its own purpose, its own codes, though the community as a whole has agreements that we all follow. And so this is one of the few neighborhoods that is actually a little mini retreat center, Dancing Shiva. We're kind of we're actually call ourselves a queer Tantra monastery, because we're sort of here in service and we offer events and we're maintaining the space and teaching and doing things like that. So that's the Tantra that's at Earth Haven. And some of the people in Earth Haven partake of that and some don't. And we have our own events, but we participate in a lot of Earth Haven events. So it's a kind of multi-layered community, which is complex and really complicated to run. But it works. It takes a lot of energy and attention, but it does work so far very well. So we are here serving the general public, but we are here for the Earth Haveners who are interested in it. And so the current teachers training program is 10 people, and one of them is from Earth Haven, the community, not in our little Dancing Shiva village. So she's very excited to be involved in this and very much a conduit to take what she learns in the training to the rest of the community. And they're willing to get that secondhand. I also have done ongoing courses for the whole community in Tantra, and those have been well received, but there was this, not the whole group was interested. Sometimes there was a big turnout, but for the longer courses, maybe we had 12 or 15 people. So there's each neighborhood has its relationship with the whole and offers something, and others offer other things, and it really feels quite balanced to me.
I wonder, Rudaji, if you could reflect at all about how or if any conversations on racism in particular have come up at Earth Haven historically or currently, or at Dancing Shiva in particular, whichever dimension you want to.
Well, as a matter of fact, we have some very active conversations have been going on for the last 2 years. So, yeah, about witnessing whiteness and people examining their attitudes toward people of other races and owning their privilege as white people when they are white, and the ones who aren't, kind of. It's a huge discussion and very hot topic, and a lot of energy going into it. Big contingents of Earth Haven going into Asheville to demonstrate in the last few weeks. And so it's a live topic. I mean, we've had people of various races and backgrounds here often, but they're still a minority. And of course, they're a minority in the overall population. But we aspire to be even more diverse than we are. And that's an ongoing discussion too.
But I think part of one of the things I've been learning in the last few weeks, maybe at a new level, is that talking about racism isn't necessarily about talking about diversity, right? Like it's also just, as you said, talking about our perspectives and belief systems. And so I just sort of throw that in because it's a learning edge for me. And I think the real change that I've been feeling is having white people educate each other in a different way. I mean, that's certainly something I've been in conversation about for the last number of years, but it feels like there's more spaciousness for that all of a sudden. So I guess I just had some curiosity about how that might be affecting Earth Haven and Dancing Shiva. So thank you for speaking to it. Yeah. And Donald has his hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the discussion. I really appreciate it. The work and the privilege of working with Dr. Ballentine, working with you, Vyana, I see other people on the Adam B. I even see here. The reality is to love and be loved and to find ways to understand each other more deeply. I see Jeff, and I've been deeply loved by these individuals and the help in shifting my life. And I also know that I then pass that love on in various ways. So I just think it's really, really important. And I know I'm on this call because of Vyana, because of Dr. Ballentine. I am on this call because of the love that they've shown over the years. And I just want to say that Adam is now passing that on in his way. The new, I say that the new level of approaches and perspectives. And I'm just grateful for that. I, as a Black man, I feel like everybody on this Zoom call, I want to love and be loved, and I have the capacity, to do that. And I'll say in closing, this is Dr. Jane Donald Dumpson, and I walk down the street and I might as well be someone with no degree, because people see this beautiful brown skin and make assessments. And it's very sad. It's unfortunate, the capacity to love and be loved and learn people's stories was what I hope. And I thank you for this opportunity to be in this forum.
Thank you for being here. It's great. It's so good to see you again on the screen. So many wonderful inputs and comments. Thank you, Donna. That's beautiful.
Thank you all for being here. And I'm so grateful, Rudy, to you on so many levels in how you have affected my life and the course of my life, and the depth of the maps that you continue to offer me in thinking about who I am and why am I here on this planet doing this crazy thing called life. And so just deep gratitude for this invitation to be in this conversation, and to have 33 people and then some, listening, and so many of beloveds. So, and perhaps soon to be beloveds. So thank you for the invitation and the space. Yeah.
Thank you for coming and being with us. We're very,
absolutely. Yeah. Have a good night, everybody.
Yes. Next week, Carol, you want to say what's coming?
You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, so next Sunday night, we'll be doing our meditation, and join us for that. And we look forward to seeing you again. And my love to everybody.
Let's everybody unmute so that we can all hear each other's voices as we say goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Hello.